Yeah, I just got muted. I just unmuted myself. Is that okay? Or
Yeah,
okay.
you're the reason we're here.
We
So
can do silent reading.
that would be good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second virtual reading from the NYU Spring 20. Is it spring? I can't even remember at this point. Is it fall? It's spring. It's spring 2020. This is our second virtual reading, and we're very pleased to present Srikanth Reddy, whom I will be referring to as Chicu because that is how I know him, and he said that was okay. I hope everybody is doing okay, and it's great to see all of you here. We're going to do this like we did the last reading, where I will take questions via the chat feature. So when the reading's done, I'll take questions and I will convey them to Chicu. And I just want to apologize up front. We obviously won't be able to get to all of them, but I will try my best to get to all the good ones. How's that? So Chicu is the author of several books and most, I think, excitingly, the upcoming Underworld Lit, which Wave Books is about to release later this year. Many of you know Chiku's, I think the only word for it is groundbreaking book of erasures called Voyager, which came out, how many years ago did that come out?
2011.
2011. Voyager, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that Voyager changed the game and upped the ante of what erasure could do, and has been an inspiration for an entire new generation of erasure poets using erasure for, I guess, even political uses. Voyager is more than that. If you haven't read it, that is your homework for tonight. But Chiku's new book is called Underworld Lit. I'm hoping we'll hear a little bit from it tonight. It seems to be, it's not out yet. I've only been able to read what is available online, little snippets of it. And it seems to be the absolutely most hybrid of all hybrid texts. Chicu, again, raising the bar. So I'm hoping that we'll hear from that. I might have a couple questions for him. Hello, Lindsay. And then we will open it up to chat questions from all of you. You ready, Chicu?
Yeah, I'm ready. I feel like you're making a pun on my name when you ask if I'm ready, but I'm just gonna.
Oh, I didn't even.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe before I start, if some of you are wondering, I see some familiar faces here. You might be wondering what happened to, like, what little hair I had since last time I saw you. Had a home haircut that went sideways, and my 11-year-old administered. So that's the new me. Thanks so much for logging in, and I'll read for about 10 minutes from the book, and then jump into the part I'm most excited about, which is talking to Matt about poetry. And if I occasionally sip from my cocktail, that's because we agreed to do this as a happy hour, but I don't know if the message went out to everyone. So I'll just read the first few pages of the book to give a feeling for what it's about. I've never done this online before, but I'll just dive in. You know, the book is called Underworld Lit. 1. In the inky, dismal, and unprofitable research of a recent leave of absence from my life, I happened upon a historical prism of Ashurbanipal that I found to be somewhat disquieting. Of an enemy whose remains he had abused in a manner that does not bear repeating here. This most scholarly of Mesopotamian kings professes, I made him more dead than he was before. Prisms of this sort were often buried in the foundations of government buildings, to be read by gods, but not men. Somewhere in the shifting labyrinth of movable stacks, I could hear a low dial tone humming without end. In Ashurbanipal's library, there's a poem, written on clay that corrects various commonly held errors regarding the venerable realm of the dead. Contrary to the accounts of Mu Lian, Madame Blavatsky, and Quasi Benefo et al., it is not customarily permitted to visit the underworld. No, the underworld visits you. 2. I lost in dark wood. Good effort, Aum, I scribble in red. Please visit ESL Lab ASAP. Yesterday's learning diagnostics bounced on my knee. I await the number 33 in a sunlit plexiglass shelter. At the far end of the bench, a girl in a deconstructed peasant blouse frowns into her phone as if it were an ancient hand mirror. Once upon a time, something, something. For heaven's sake, La Dante, I pencil in the margin. My students are all over the map these days. I rub my temples for a spell, the bench beneath me thrumming with traffic. The pages flutter and settle like a stunned wren rearranging itself on my lap. In the middle of life, I found myself lost in a forest of shadows. Out of nowhere, my bus splashes past, out of service. My benchmate stuffs her belongings into a bursting purse and storms off with a curse. Looks like I'll have to reschedule with song yet again. Translate the opening of the Inferno into standard American English. You may refer to your notes. Stay calm. Good luck. 3. For the past several years, I've taught an introductory course on world literature at the university where I'm presently employed. The offering has frequently proven to be a disappointment, both to myself and to the students, some in headscarves, some occasionally dressed in fatigues, who register for this seminar in order to satisfy their humanities requirement. As far as classes go, it was an almost painless experience. The instructor is fairly intelligent and enthusiastic about the material, but is unreceptive, even intolerant of anything that is not a poem or a poem in prose form. Made me question things, including the value of higher learning. Looking over the feedback last summer, I began to consider a different approach. There would be new assignments, self-assessments, and regularly scheduled office hours this time around, followed by a transitional withdrawal of black gowns through the spring morning mist. And because I know comparatively little of this world, I've decided to work my way up from below. 4. Hume 101, Introduction to the Underworld, cross-listed with Divinity and Comp Lit. In this course, students will be ferried across the river of sorrow, subsist on a diet of clay, weigh their hearts against a feather on the infernal balance, and ascend a viewing pagoda in order to gaze upon their homelands until emptied of all emotion. Texts will include the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Mayan Book of the Dead, the Ethiopian Book of the Dead, and Muriel Rukeyser's Book of the Dead. The goals of the seminar are to introduce students to the posthumous disciplinary regimes of various cultures, and to help them develop the communication skills that are crucial for success in today's global marketplace. All readings in English. Requirements include the death of the student, an oral report, and a final paper. 5. I promised my wife that I would call Dr. Song today. After putting Mira down for her nap and slipping outside for a smoke, I lifted the receiver. The sound it emitted, which I've heard without pause countless times before, seemed to me otherworldly now, like somebody's finger playing on the wet rim of a crystal bowl in a derelict theater before the wars. It's hard to say how long I stood there listening. It may have been seconds or seasons. The rings of Saturn kept turning in their groove. For reasons beyond me, our seminar had already moved on from late medieval Europe to developing world underworlds. I dialed 1-800-INFERNO, and before the first ring, a woman's voice answered in heavily accented English. "Is it you?" "I think so," I replied. Outside, the honey locusts sprinkled their pale spinning leaves in real time. Focusing on one as it fell seemed to slow the general descent. "O creature, gracious and good," the faraway lady recited, as if reading against her will from a prepared text, traversing the dusky element to visit us who stained the world with blood. I could hear rain trickling in a gutter spout on the other end of the line. "Please," I said into the receiver, "remove my name from your list." 6. While outlining the requirements for our first critical essay of the term, I notice a hand rising in world historical time at the back of the classroom. "What if I'm ideologically opposed to revision?" asks the red-headed boy in a New Slaves t-shirt. A city bus unloads its pageantry outside the window. A handful of sparrows erupts from the equestrian statue on the quad. I remember Sun Tzu's advice to humanities instructors, which I review on index cards at the outset of each academic quarter. Hold out baits to entice the enemy, feign disorder, and crush him. "What exactly is your ideology?" I ask, stroking my beard. "I'm a Zen Naxalite crypto-objectivist," replies my interlocutor. "How about you?" I have no choice but to improvise. Pro-recycling? Anti-genocide? A voice from beyond my peripheral vision says, "You're nothing but a pseudo-Kantian neoliberal mirage with meta-narcissistic tendencies." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." Maybe I'll read 2 more sections. 7. A window onto the purgatorial cosmology of late imperial China may be found on page 26 of Leon Uyghur's Folklore Chinoise Moderne, Xian Xian. Over 40 years of residence in the Celestial Empire, this unsung Jesuit sinologist labored to dismantle what he once called the whole unbearable grid into which we have forcibly cantonized God's children. Contemporary Anglophone readers, however, must do without an English version of Father Uyghur's folklore. You can see here it's in French and Chinese. You probably can't see it. "I'll have no more English translations," Uyghur writes in a letter to his superiors, dated 3 February 1929. "Lord knows we don't want to edify Protestants." Thus, the strange tale of Chen from Huchu Fu remains largely unknown in this land. But if you'll pardon my remedial French, I thought I might piece together a rough English rendition for purposes of classroom instruction. 8. In the district of Huchu Fu, the magistrate's assistant Chen was taking a nap in his cabinet of pain. Suddenly, a motorized airport staircase appeared and beckoned him to follow. It led Chen down a path hidden by rustling thickets of bamboo to a clearing, where on a high pedestal, an enormous mirror waited in the moonlight. Regard what you once were in your previous life, said the staircase. Looking into the mirror, Chen saw a donkey muzzled with wire. The beast gazed sadly back at him from its muddy pen. Hummingbirds the color of spilled oil flitted across the frame. Now see what you were in the life before that one. Rubbing his eyes, Chen looked again. This time he saw a girl wringing a bloody rag out of an upper-story window. Her lips appeared to be moving, but Chen couldn't make out the words to the song. Again, said the vehicle. Chen peered into the mirror once more. Where the girl had been, he now saw a high official in old Ming costume, black cap, red dragonfly robe, belt with jade buckle, bent over a faded map of some unfamiliar region. Just then, a disheveled servant rushed into the clearing, prostrated himself before Chen, and exclaimed, "Don't you recognize me? I was your valet in Tatung Fu, but of course, that was over 200 years ago." Rising to his feet, he handed Chen a scroll. "What's this?" Chen asked dreamily. "See for yourself," the servant replied. "It will clear your name." Draft only. Please do not circulate. Trans. Ce n'est qu'un projet. Ne circule pas, s'il vous plaît. Trans. Jingong fei fa xiong. Qingbuyao shunhuan. Trans. That's it. I mean, that's the beginning of it. But, yeah.
Great, thank you, Chicu. We're going to get some questions, but I wanted to ask you,
Great.
Except for your first book, Facts for Visitors, everything else you've done has really pushed sort of at the boundary of what poetry can be and poetry can do. And so I guess maybe if you could just start out talking to us and to the guests about, I don't know where that comes from and like what you sort of envisioned this to be and maybe how it changed by the time you got to the end of it.
Wow, well, that's really nice way of describing things, but actually I feel like totally hopelessly like traditional, and when I read really exciting poetry, I feel like that I'm just very kind of old-fashioned and kind of interested in like kind of experimenting with kind of forms, but within those experiments kind of trying to kind of keep the kind of like basic humanity of what's most like ancient about the art form, kind of in view. And the funny thing is, it's like maybe trying different stuff is just different ways of trying to get back to why I fell in love with writing poetry or reading poetry in the first place, which is just seeing like, my identity reflected in other people's, language.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually like totally don't think of myself as like writing experimentally, but kind of trying different like techniques maybe.
Well, I think that's what's so pleasing about them, is because at their core they talk to us. I mean, I think super experimental works that go beyond comprehension can be super interesting for reasons. But I think what's great about these is that they're a really good balance of formally inventive or formally borrowing, but at the same time, like Voyager is it's a heartbreaker, and it's actually talking to us about something. And what you just read and the parts I've read online of this are just so direct in their voice, but of course structurally they're so it's so interesting and amazing. One of the questions came through about someone would like to know about the process of this. Voyager, I think a lot of people know, took quite a while. Was this also a long process of discovery of the form, or did you know the form before you set out?
Yeah. Well, there kind of is no form really. It's just kind of prose, sections. I kind of thought about it as like a day book of a really shitty year. I think you kind of get a feeling for what that year was about from what I read. But I should maybe say, like in 2009, my wife and I learned that we were expecting our daughter Amira, who and we've been kind of trying for months to conceive, and so we're really over the moon. And then, like 3 days later, I found out that I had a cancer diagnosis. So we went from like, birth and life to like death, in a really short period of time. And they were kind of like overlapping each other for a couple of years then. And I should also say, like, I'm fine now. I'm like 10 years out of that melanoma diagnosis. And but for a while we drew up a will, and we were also setting up the crib and the nursery, and so this kind of came out of that that kind of overlap of birth and death, or life and death. And I was untenured and in the kind of limbo of that, kind of being just starting out as a teacher and not sure of so many things. And I was teaching a class on world literature at the time. And for some reason it seemed like, well, in the middle of like a war and everything else that was happening, why not think about the ways that the underworld keeps popping up in world literature? So that was a kind of like circumstantial kind of way of that this all started to kind of come together, but it did take another 9 years to kind of make that difficult time kind of formally available. And the way it did was pretty simple. I just decided to write 3 sections of 33, a book in 3 parts, fall term, a winter term, and a spring term, to kind of capture that year. And each section would be 33 sections, because that's just what Dante kind of does in his poems. So that was kind of the formal side of it. And then I kind of filled in the blanks with everything.
Here's a question about, I guess, the source material, really, the different traditions. Even in the small part you read to us, there's so many things mentioned. I mean, even in the list on the kind of quote syllabus of all the different books of the dead, I love the call out to the Rukeyser one. I just read that recently in school.
I've actually never read it.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's really good. Well, this question is basically asking, how much did you, how did you grapple with, like, how much you felt like you had to know about them to do justice to them? What was your approach to trying to juggle all of these and like condense them into your work?
Yeah, well, so I think part of what the book is about, or just what I'm interested in, is like what a fraud I feel like when I'm teaching, and how little I know about what I'm assigned to teach sometimes, and sometimes what I choose to teach. Sometimes I try to teach stuff that I want to learn about. And so I think one thing about writing a book about teaching is the last thing you want is someone who really feels like they're teaching you in their book. The didacticism is so repellent, but it's also kind of like what we're doing for a living, and there's something more interesting than just imparting knowledge. I think there's something about actually inhabiting the uncertainties and ugly feelings of teaching that like to me were like the most interesting parts of it. So I did do a lot of reading about the underworlds of different cultures, but I also like totally don't know how to speak or anything about Chinese. And so when I read a line in Chinese, I hope part of the funny thing about it is that I sound like a total baby when I'm saying it, right?
There was actually an early question that came through that I thought was very funny. This person, she answered her own question. She asked me, "Is this funny?" And then she was like, "Wait, yes, it's hilarious."
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing about reading on Zoom is like you don't really get the laugh track. So, you know, it sounds all very like somber and serious.
Well, and also the subject matter, and especially I imagine as a reader starts to uncover your own personal story underneath it. It's not funny, but your syllabus sure sounds great.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I mean, I kind of feel like that, um, you know, the dark humor is kind of the only humor that was available to me then. And
Yeah.
I kind of wish that I actually could snap out of it, but then things like, you know, pandemics happen and then, you know, what can you do but be kind of, you know, have gallows humor
Yeah.
that sometimes is like hard to detect because the material is so difficult, right?
Except now I think it's an adaptation. It's a positive genetic adaptation.
Right. Right.
Can
Like
you?
silliness would be nice though, right? Like just like zany, you know, I want to see just totally frivolous, you know, apolitical, you know, exuberance, you know, and it's hard to come by now.
Yeah. There are several questions about, I mean, and I think, you know, this is sort of maybe the shiniest feature of Underworld Lit is the hybridity. Are there other hybrid texts that you can talk to us about that you, maybe not base this on, but just like, you know, or just things that you remember reading, you know, when you were younger? I know you and I have talked a lot over
Yeah.
the years about prose and novels, and
Yeah.
especially big old novels.
Yeah.
Are there things like that that, you know, like I said, not that you necessarily base this on, but that you sort of go to?
Yeah, so I guess one thing about the hybrid thing is you could also think about it as like documentary, you know, so it's like if you want to let a lot of different kinds of material into the artwork, then it starts to feel like it's collaging kind of documentary materials from a life. And that has the pleasure of, you know, pastiche and collage and the different kinds of textural, you know, and different media kind of experience that I think you can kind of get into poetry that you can't get in other art forms. Um, and, you know, I mean, one book that was really, well, two books that were really like exciting for me when I was trying to figure out how to put this together. And I don't even feel like I really managed to put it together in the end. I feel like things don't necessarily hold together the way I'd want them to. Um, are Claudia Rankine's book, Don't Let Me Be Lonely, which I don't hear people talking about that much because Citizen kind of stole the show, but I think Don't Let Me Be Lonely, it's so beautiful.
I think maybe, I mean, you know, who am I to say, but I think structurally it's maybe more interesting.
For me, it was exhilarating, you know, and you know, I think there's something about the way Rankine uses prose and um, intimacy in that book that was really exciting. And then Anne Carson, kind of everything she does, but her book Knox was really
Yeah.
thrilling. And so I guess you might think of Carson more as hybrid than Rankine, but I think they're both documentary in really powerful ways.
Do you sit down and write, you know, like poems these days, or you know, or do you have projects that you work on?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because I think the hybridity thing, or the kind of formal thing and the experimental thing, are all, one thing I didn't say was that I haven't felt like able to just sit down and write a poem uh, since like,
9/11.
yeah. Yeah, the terrorists won that one. But it did basically kind of like stop me from writing lyric poetry. And, I mean, I was kind of hoping that we would have a conversation, about both of our writing, because, you have done a lot of different things to write lyric, right? Like, um, the hypnagogic kind of writing out of lines that come to you while you're falling asleep it's like a device,
Sure.
right? Um, and I think that, I mean, maybe that's like a part of what being a poet, at least for me, feels like now, is um, trying to find ways back toward poetic practice,
Mhm.
but I can't just do it the way I did when I was in college anymore. I don't know if you feel that way, or if you're still writing stuff, or
I mean, yeah, I think I'm also trying to keep finding new ways to do a thing that I really love. I really love the lyric poem. A little
yeah.
tiny. Really love tiny little lyric poems. It's obviously not the only thing I've done, and like the book before this one was a 240-page poem. Um,
Right.
so, it's not the only thing I'm doing, but I do always love to try to get to that. But you're right, you have to keep finding new ways to do it, and I think just the idea of like when you're in college, you could just sit down and look out at the quad and all the trees and write your lyric poem. That doesn't come the same way. Um,
Yeah, I wonder if that's part of that is like historical trauma, or just like, the writing literary history that we're in, or the kind of development of the time you are in your life. But, I love when I read poets, and I most admire poets who just simply write lyric,
mhm.
right?
I grabbed a book off my shelf the other day. Its title leaped out at me. I had read it years ago, and it was Moscow in the Plague Years
Hmm.
by Marina Tsvetaeva, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, perfect. It was like written in 1918 during the last pandemic, and she's trapped literally in a garret attic writing poems in lockdown. Except she can't go to the grocery store or get
Right.
Amazon food to deliver. So I thought this will be great, and I'll read it, and it'll make me feel better and stuff. And it's almost all these lyric love poems.
Interesting.
It's strange. It's beautiful and it's strange, but there's very little of it that is reactive to her situation. Some, I mean, there's some.
Uh-huh.
It's funny how she's able to still do that. A lot of it is based on relationship and love, and she's I guess that's her engine there. Um, Here's another question from someone about I guess because again we keep talking about the hybridity. Were there sort of works outside of literature that
Mhm.
helped this? Movies,
Yeah.
painting, music. I mean, music helps me a lot. Although I renewed my objection today to listening to music with lyrics while I'm trying to write because it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't listen to music, but I watched, and I didn't do anything while I was writing, except when I wasn't writing, I was like totally watching like lots of films. And I'm kind of just like a slavish Joss Whedon fan. So, I think the kind of escapism of the kind of worlds that uh, film can build, in different genres is really exciting. But um, I also did a lot of reading about the underworlds of different cultures, and that to me was kind of the most exciting thing, was seeing how like the classical Mayan underworld was kind of similar in some ways, but like totally different from the like Ming Dynasty Chinese underworld, right?
Yeah.
And the ways different like peoples and cultures like think about what happens to us and how there's another world inside of ours. Um, but you know, the Chinese one is like full of bureaucracy, and you have to like just bribe people to
Yeah,
get from one like, yeah, yeah. And in Chinese culture, there's they have something that they call hell money, where you burn artificial money so that the dead can get that cash and bribe like judges.
it's like
Um,
Venmo for the dead.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And like the Mayan, you know, underworld is one where there's kind of bloody court ritual sacrifices, and you know, and the Egyptian one tells you a very different, it gives you a different picture of Egypt at a time in its, you know, history, and yet they're all supposed to be like timeless, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I thought that it seems like, you know, even now when we're all kind of like stuck in what feels like a little bit of a posthumous kind of space right now, and you know, our world looks different and haunted. Um, that that set of kind of explorations and those rabbit holes into, you know, different afterlives was probably the most exciting kind of source for this.
Great. And you didn't have like a creepy soundtrack or anything?
No, I I used to try and listen to like Philip Glass when I was writing, but that was too distracting. So I just
This is just between you and me, but I have a song recommendation for you when you get to a chapter in Dune. I'll hit you up. There's a very specific soundtrack that I accidentally found.
great. I'm on chapter 2.
Uh, it's great, right? I mean, it's
It's really good.
really good. Yeah. Well, and you know, that's I think something you and I have always shared is, you know, we like you just said, you know, this love of poetry and the the lyric poetry, which is, you know, kind of like the core of the whole experience to poets. Um, but prose novels have always been a huge part of
Yeah.
experience and mine too. And I think it just sort of that explains to me almost more than anything your willingness to blur the boundaries when you start writing. Um,
Yeah, and you know, I think the ways that I think this whole idea of like um, the cosmology that like a novel can create, like just the making of a world and the way we can lose ourselves in them, speaks more and more to me. And you know, we've talked about Cesar Ira, the Argentinian novellaist, and you know, he's just like obsessed with creating a new world with each book, and not knowing in advance. I think he calls it like a flight in advance is how he writes. He never knows what the next page will be, um, and yet that, so there's something actually that's like very lyric and poetic in the construction of those novels, right?
yeah.
Because they have the lyric unpremeditated.
Well, poets, you know, I don't think a lot of fiction writers like it. You know, poets like it.
Right, right.
Because they're not very good novels. You know, they're not like good novels, but they're unbelievably beautiful, poetic novellas. You know,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and
why should they have all the fun of the world building? I mean, I think that's one of the things that excites me about this book. Is it is largely based on your you know world in Chicago, obviously, but it's also world building in a much bigger way.
yeah, and you know, I think the rabbit holes inside of our own worlds, whether they're like watching a film or listening to a song or reading a newspaper article, it's like we're always shot through with, I mean, in a way, the problem of our contemporary, you know, condition is that we're distracted by other worlds, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's like we're always trying to figure out like, what am I going to do locally, where am I locally, or where am I in relation to like the lived worlds or the life worlds of, you know, others, you know, past and present and future, right?
Yeah.
um, So it seems like a big question right now.
For sure, for sure. I think we're gonna wrap it up if that's all right. It's been such a pleasure.
No, I want to keep talking.
I do too. I think that we are. I think that we are trying to. We have people. We have messages from people in Paris. It's after midnight there, and they're happy to be here. But you know, they got to go to bed.
Cool.
So it's been so great talking to you and hearing this. I mean, I've only heard snippets from this. I cannot wait to get this book. When is the official release date?
August 4th, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
you know, God willing, I'm going to walk down the bookstore and buy it.
Right. Well, thank you guys, and thank you all for listening. This is super weird, but super nice too. So
really great. Everybody else, take care of yourselves. I think you have to wear masks now, so do it. Wear your masks. Be good. Be good to each other. Be good to the grocery store workers. And we will see you again soon. Chicu, wonderful as always. I can't wait to see you again for real.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.